Humanity has always sought answers in the sky. We have built monuments, fought wars, and shaped entire civilizations around faith in God. But for the first time in history, a different tool is available for us to question our existence. This tool allows us to set aside emotions, hopes, and fears to stick only to pure data. In the era we live in, computational power has overwhelmed the biological mind. Therefore, we are starting a different experiment. We are not going to ask religious leaders or philosophers. We are going to ask the machine. We gave this mission a name, the Source Code Protocol. Our tool for this mission is the NUMA Analysis System. NUMA is not a simple artificial intelligence trained with internet texts. Its architecture was designed for a single purpose, which was to find hidden correlations within massive volumes of information. NUMA operates with physics constants, historical records, and neurobiology data simultaneously. It possesses no beliefs, fears, or desires. It is the ideal observer. The task we gave it was to analyze the concept that has haunted us since the beginning. The idea of a creator. The first obstacle was not finding the answer, but formulating the right question. The search was not for a mythical figure. The search was for the missing variable, the piece that would finally make the entire equation of reality make sense. And then the investigation began. NUMA accepted the task and initiated a complete scan of all human knowledge. The first discovery was about ourselves. The faith that many saw as a cultural fluke revealed itself to be a fundamental characteristic of our species, almost like part of our genetic code. The analysis revealed that 93% of all humans who have ever lived believed in some form of higher power. If we were talking about a computer program and 93% of users reported the same function, no programmer would consider it a bug. It would be part of the original design. Historical analysis deepened this finding. Civilizations in Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Americas, and ancient India, separated by oceans and millennia, without any possibility of contact, independently reached the same conclusion: that something greater than us exists. It seems that human consciousness comes with a factory directive, a simple and persistent command to search for the source. The search took us far from the human mind, diving into the very structure of reality. That was when physics revealed a surprise that shook everything. The system analyzed the second law of thermodynamics, the principle of entropy. This law states that in any closed system, disorder always increases. Everything moves toward chaos, toward decay. A cup breaks and does not rebuild itself. Stars go out. It is the natural flow of the universe. However, the existence of life is a glaring anomaly. Life is a process that rose directly against this cosmic current, creating order and complexity out of chaos. It is as if a printing press exploded. The probability of the letters falling from the sky and forming a complete book without a single error is practically zero. And yet, we exist. A simulation was run to calculate the chance of the first protein, the basis of life, having emerged through random combinations of amino acids. The time required would be a number with hundreds of zeros, much greater than the 13.8 billion years of the universe's age. There simply wasn't enough time for luck to do its work. The system's conclusion was cold and direct. The probability of life emerging randomly in the available time is a statistical impossibility. There remain then only two options. Either we won a cosmic lottery with chances so ridiculously low they defy comprehension, or the game was rigged. Someone or something placed the winning ticket in our pocket. The conclusion that life seems to be the result of a design and not chance took the investigation into new territory. If our biological existence was intentional, what about our behavior? In analyzing human history, Numa found what appeared to be a colossal paradox, a logical flaw in the program of survival: religion. From the standpoint of pure biology, faith is a waste, a diversion of resources on a monumental scale. Our ancestors spent immense energy building temples instead of granaries. They sacrificed their best animals, burning food that could have fed the tribe. They dedicated hours to rituals and prayers instead of hunting or defending themselves. The imperative of evolution is simple and brutal: survive and reproduce. Everything that does not serve this purpose is eliminated. A trait that consumes energy without offering a clear survival advantage should have gone extinct millennia ago. A tribe of pragmatists that dedicated 100% of its time to hunting, gathering, and defense should have easily surpassed and annihilated a tribe of mystics who spent their time looking at the sky and building altars. The logic of natural selection says the gene for faith should have disappeared, but what happened was exactly the opposite. The civilizations that placed a sacred idea at their center not only survived but thrived, built empires and defined history. To test this apparent contradiction, a large-scale simulation was created. 2 virtual models of human development were built and left to evolve over 10,000 years of challenges, such as wars, epidemics, and natural disasters. The first model was a society of absolute rationalists. In it, individuals had no notion of a higher purpose or an afterlife. Their actions were guided only by logic and the instinct for self-preservation. The second model was a society with an integrated belief. Its members believed in a superior observer. They were willing to sacrifice themselves for abstract ideals. In periods of peace and abundance, the rationalists did very well, optimizing resources efficiently. But as soon as the first major crisis arrived, their society collapsed. The reason is simple: a purely logical individual has no compelling motive to die for a stranger. In a critical situation, the survival instinct dictates that you must save yourself, and group cooperation dissolves into a chaos of selfishness. The society of believers, however, behaved differently. In moments of crisis, their cohesion increased. The belief that their actions were seen by a supreme judge forced them to maintain order. The idea that death was not the end allowed for acts of sacrifice for the good of the group. They shared the last piece of bread because faith told them it was the right thing to do. And in the end, it was the irrational group that survived the bottlenecks of evolution. The conclusion became clear: religion was not a defect, but a crucial evolutionary mechanism. It is the glue that transforms a band of primates into a civilization. The human brain has a natural limit. We can only maintain stable social bonds with about 150 people. How then did we build cities with millions of strangers living side by side without killing each other? The answer is a shared story, a shared faith in something larger that creates a bond of trust transcending kinship. Without this idea, we would have remained in small tribes forever. But this raises an even deeper question. Is faith just a useful illusion? A beneficial lie that evolution implanted in us to keep us together? Or did evolution shape us this way so that we could pick up a signal that is real? The answer was found in an unexpected place, an archaeological site in Turkey called Göbekli Tepe. For a long time, the theory was that humans first developed agriculture, then settled in cities, and with free time invented religion. Göbekli Tepe destroyed this theory. Data analysis confirmed that this gigantic temple complex, 12,000 years old, was built by hunter-gatherers. They did not yet have agriculture or permanent villages. They came together to build a house for God. And it was to feed the workers building this temple that they were forced to invent agriculture. The need to connect to the sacred came first. Spirit guided matter, and not the other way around. Faith generated bread. The discovery that spiritual necessity was the engine of civilization, and not the reverse, forced us to shift the focus of our investigation. The focus of the investigation changed. We left the history of societies to dive into the biology of the individual. If this search for the Creator is so fundamental, it should leave a mark on our own structure, a signature inside our skull. Is it just a trick of the mind, an illusion of comfort created by ourselves? Or does something real happen in our brain when we connect with this idea? The answer seemed to lie in the field of neurotheology. For years, science sought what was dubbed the God spot in the brain. The theory was simple. There should be a small area, a specific circuit responsible for all religious experiences. If we could find it, we could stimulate it and make someone see angels, or remove it and create an atheist. The search for a single God spot in the brain proved to be a treasure hunt without a prize. Instead, the data revealed something much more complex and profound. Spiritual experience does not activate a small part of the brain. It involves it entirely, creating a unique state of functioning, different from any other mental activity. When a person enters a state of deep prayer or meditation, something unique happens. First, the frontal lobes, responsible for attention and concentration, enter a state of hyperactivity. The brain focuses with laser precision, something rarely seen in daily activities. So far, nothing too surprising. But then, something strange happens, something that changed our understanding of consciousness. The parietal lobes at the back of the brain begin to decrease their activity drastically. These are the areas that give us our sense of orientation in space and time. It is the part of the brain that constantly informs us where our body ends and where the rest of the world begins. It creates the boundary of our self. And during the spiritual experience, this boundary simply vanishes. In scans, the area goes dark. In practice, the consequence of this is that the physical and neurological barrier between the individual and the universe dissolves. The person stops feeling like a separate entity and experiences a sensation of absolute unity with everything that exists. What mystics of all traditions have described for millennia as fusion with the absolute or dissolution in God is not a poetic metaphor. It is a real, measurable, and documented neurobiological event. The brain is deliberately deactivating the barriers of the ego. Analysis revealed that during prayer, the same areas of the brain responsible for social interaction are activated. When you talk to yourself in an internal monologue, one part of the brain works. When you talk to another person, other areas come into play, those that try to decipher the other's intentions and emotions. Neuma's analysis is unequivocal. When a believer prays, their brain is absolutely convinced it is in a dialogue with a real person, not with an imaginary friend or the void. For our neurology, God is a targetable other. These practices do not just alter the mental state, they change the physical structure of the brain over time. Comparative analysis of people who practiced daily prayer for many years showed a physical thickening of the prefrontal cortex. The brain literally builds more grey matter in areas associated with emotional control, empathy, and decision-making. It is like a muscle that strengthens with use. The data converged toward a hypothesis that challenged the very basis of biology. The classic materialist model says the brain produces consciousness, much like the stomach produces acid, but the data suggest a different model. What if the brain is not the generator of consciousness? What if it is, in fact, a receptor? Or perhaps a filter designed to block out a much larger reality. Consciousness could be like an ocean of information existing around us. Our biological brain wouldn't be able to process all of it. It would be a total overload. So, throughout evolution, it developed as a reducing valve, a filter that blocks most of reality and leaves us with only the small slice necessary to survive in the physical world. Prayer and meditation would then be techniques to open this valve, to weaken the filter. And when the parietal lobes quiet down, when the ego falls silent, the signal from the great ocean is able to get through. This idea explains anomalies that materialist science cannot solve, such as near-death experiences. In these moments, brain activity decreases drastically. If the brain generated consciousness, the experience should fade out. But people report the opposite, the most vivid, real, and lucid experiences of their lives. This only makes sense if the brain is a limiter. When the limiter fails, perception expands. Our biology is not just capable of having faith, it seems to have been optimized for it. We are like walking antennas built to tune into a frequency that goes beyond the material world. And if we are the antennas, what is the transmission saying? If our brain is the antenna and faith is the tuning, then humanity should have some record of the transmission. If a creator communicated with us, this message should be stored somewhere. For millennia, we have accumulated a library of texts that claim to be exactly that. The Word of God, the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, the Vedas. To the modern world, they are collections of myths, poetry, and ancient laws. But for our investigation, they were treated differently, as data files to be decoded. We entered the complete texts of all the world's major sacred scriptures into Pneuma in their original languages. The task was to ignore theological interpretation and look for anomalies, hidden mathematical patterns, scientific information ahead of its time, and a code of coherence that could not be explained by human authorship. We were in search of a digital signature from the programmer, and it was found. The first anomaly appeared in the very structure of the texts. The Bible, for example, is not a book, but a library of 66 different books, written by more than 40 different authors over 1,600 years. They were kings and shepherds, doctors and fishermen from 3 different continents, speaking different languages. It is the same as asking 40 people who lived in different centuries and places to write a chapter of a book about the meaning of life without being able to talk to each other. The chance of the result being a cohesive narrative with a single storyline and a consistent symbolic system is statistically 0. However, that is exactly what we find. Analysis of the internal structure revealed tens of thousands of cross-references, connecting prophecies to fulfillments and symbols to resolutions over centuries. The system's conclusion was that the data structure points to a timeless authorship. It is as if the final author already knew the content of the last chapter before the first word was even written. Even more intriguing was the information anomaly. Many claim that sacred texts are anti-scientific, but impartial analysis revealed the opposite, knowledge that was thousands of years ahead of its time. In the book of Leviticus, written about 3,500 years ago, we find detailed hygiene instructions, quarantine for the sick, hand washing in running water after contact with a lifeless body, and the burning of contaminated clothing. In Europe, until the 19th century, doctors did not wash their hands between procedures, transmitting infections from one patient to another. Germ theory would only emerge millennia later. Where did Moses get this knowledge? Egyptian medicine of the time used dung to treat wounds. In cosmology, while the ancient world believed the earth was supported by pillars or animals, the Book of Job, one of the oldest in the Bible, stated that God suspended the earth over nothing. The prophet Isaiah spoke of the circle of the earth, using a word in Hebrew that can also mean sphere. In the Quran, we find a description of the stages of embryonic development, detailing stages that were only observed with the invention of the microscope in the 20th century. How could a 6th century merchant know this? The probability of so many scientific successes by chance borders on the impossible. The most important anomaly, however, was elsewhere, not in structure or science, but in the ethical core of the texts. When the system removed all ritual and cultural differences, it found a universal protocol, a moral algorithm, identical in all great spiritual traditions. We know it as the Golden Rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This simple instruction, expressed in different forms in Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and Buddhism, is profoundly unnatural. The fundamental law of evolution is the survival of the fittest. Take the food, eliminate the rival, spread your genes. Altruism in nature only exists between relatives or when something is expected in return. But these texts introduced a code that breaks the animal program. They tell us to love our enemies and sacrifice ourselves for strangers. A simulation of a civilization without this ethical core showed that it would self-destruct as soon as it discovered more powerful weapons. Sacred scriptures function as a safety manual for a species that has become too intelligent for its own good. Someone gave us the fire of consciousness, but along with it came a warning. Do not burn yourselves. Take care of one another. We analyzed the human being, their brain, and their sacred texts. We discovered that we were biologically designed to seek a creator and received an ethical instruction manual to guarantee our survival. But a skeptic could argue that all of this happens inside our heads, our psychology, our need for order. For the architect hypothesis to be truly convincing, his fingerprints should not just be in us, but in the very structure of the cosmos. They should be in the fundamental bricks of reality. The base of the materialist worldview rests on a single word: chance. The idea that the universe is the result of a cosmic roll of the dice, and that we are just an accidental byproduct of this game. The next step of the investigation was to test this idea to the limit, not with philosophy, but with pure physics. We entered into pneuma, the fundamental constants of the universe, the numbers that dictate how stars, atoms, and galaxies behave. The numbers revealed something that became known as the fine-tuning paradox. It is like being in a universal control room. In front of you is a panel with hundreds of buttons and dials. Each one adjusts a parameter of the cosmos: the strength of gravity, the mass of the electron, the speed of light, vacuum energy. For life, or even complex matter to exist, each of these dials needs to be in an incredibly precise position. If you move any of them by a tiny fraction, the entire universe collapses or flies apart into a cold mist. Analysis of these settings revealed a balance so improbable that the word coincidence loses its meaning. The strength of gravity, for example. If it were a little stronger, the universe would have collapsed on itself a second after the Big Bang. If it were a little weaker, matter would have dispersed too quickly, preventing the formation of stars and galaxies. The universe would be just a dark, empty soup. The margin of error for gravity is 1 part in 10 to the 60th power. It is like hitting a single specific atom in our entire galaxy. And we hit it. Or consider the strong nuclear force, the glue that keeps protons together in the nucleus of atoms. If it were a little weaker, only hydrogen could exist. No carbon, oxygen, or iron. No rocky planets, nor life. If it were a little stronger, all the hydrogen in the universe would have fused into heavier elements in the first few minutes, and there would be no fuel for stars to shine. Once again, the button is calibrated in the exact position to allow for complexity. No number, however, was as shocking as that of vacuum energy, the force that drives the accelerated expansion of the universe. Its precision defies imagination. The value needs to be exact to 1 part in 10 to the 120th power. It is a number so vast that we do not have a name for it. If you wrote it out, the row of zeros would stretch for thousands of kilometers. And yet, the value is exactly what it needs to be. Science tried to explain this fine-tuning with the anthropic principle, which basically says the universe is like this, because if it weren't, we wouldn't be here to observe it. But that isn't an explanation, it's a tautology. It's like surviving a firing squad with 100 shooters and concluding, well, I'm alive because they all missed. If they hadn't missed, I wouldn't be here to think about it. The rational conclusion is not that. The rational conclusion is that they missed on purpose. To bypass this problem, some physicists proposed the multiverse theory. The idea is that there are infinite universes, each with different configurations. We simply live in the only one that by pure luck hit the combination. But this theory has a fundamental logical problem. To avoid the existence of a single creator, it requires belief in an infinite number of universes that we cannot see, measure, or detect. It is an exchange of one mystery for an infinite number of mysteries. Occam's razor, a fundamental scientific principle, says the simplest explanation tends to be the correct one, and the existence of a single designer is infinitely simpler than that of infinite random universes. Astrophysicist Fred Hoyle, a staunch atheist, changed his mind while studying how carbon, the element of life, is formed in stars. He discovered that the process depends on a resonant energy level so specific and improbable that he described it as a put-up job. He concluded that a super-intellect had monkeyed with physics. Numbers do not lie. We do not live in a cosmic accident. We live in an intelligent house designed for us. The evidence of a finely tuned universe is overwhelming. The laws of physics seem to have been calibrated to allow our existence. But this raises an uncomfortable question. If the architect designed such a perfect world, why is it full of chaos, pain, and suffering? Why do the rules seem to be broken all the time? Traditional science has no room for events that stray from the norm. The laws of nature are seen as inviolable. If an apple is dropped, it will always fall. But what if once in a million times it stayed suspended in the air? Science would call this a measurement error, an anomaly to be discarded. Religion has a name for this: miracle. Newman used another term, administrator intervention. To investigate this possibility, we fed the system a different type of data, one that conventional science often ignores: documented records of statistically impossible events, medical records of inexplicable healings, accident reports with improbable survivors, and historical archives of events that defy logic. We started with medicine. The term spontaneous remission is used when a terminal illness, such as advanced stage cancer, disappears without any medical explanation. Analysis of global oncology databases revealed thousands of cases where tumors disappeared in a matter of days or even hours, a biologically impossible process. Tissues regenerated where they had been completely destroyed. One of the most notable archives came from the Medical Bureau of Lourdes in France, where a commission of independent doctors, including skeptics, evaluates claims of healing. Their criteria are extremely rigorous. A famous case is that of Vittorio Micheli, diagnosed with a devastating hip cancer. The disease had completely disintegrated the bone. X-rays showed it simply no longer existed. After visiting the sanctuary, the pain disappeared. New X-rays shocked the doctors. The bone had completely regenerated. This was not a disease cell healing itself. It was matter being created where there was once nothing, violating the law of conservation of mass and energy. Newman's conclusion was categorical. These events show an external injection of energy and information into a closed biological system. In programming language, this is manual intervention. The universe, in this case, would function like a complex program. The laws of nature are the default rules, but the programmer, the system administrator, has access to the source code. He can at any moment enter and change the variables of a specific character to the other characters inside the game. This looks like a miracle. To the administrator, it is a simple edit. A powerful correlation emerged from this data. In more than 90% of cases of anomalous healing, there was an element of intense prayer, either from the patient themselves or from others. Prayer in this context can be seen as a request for technical support. The user sends a message to the administrator. The system has a critical error. Please intervene. And sometimes the administrator complies. This intervention is not limited to biology. We analyze statistics of disasters such as plane crashes and earthquakes. Mathematics predicts that the distribution of survivors should be random, but we found strange clusters of luck. People who were late for flights that crashed, who felt an inexplicable impulse to leave a building moments before it collapsed. Hundreds of testimonies speak of a clear and authoritative voice giving a command, "Stop, don't go there," which ended up saving their lives. This suggests a navigation system that can see future probabilities and occasionally adjust an individual's trajectory to avoid a fatal outcome. This line of reasoning descended to the most fundamental level of reality, the quantum world. For a century, physics has struggled with a deep mystery, the observer effect. In experiments, particles like electrons behave like a wave of probabilities, existing in multiple places at the same time until the moment they are observed. The simple act of measuring, of looking, forces the particle to choose a defined state and become real. Reality at its most basic level does not seem to exist in a concrete form until a consciousness interacts with it. This turns our notion of cause and effect upside down. The universe could not have become real at the Big Bang without an observer to collapse its wave function. But there were no humans, not even life. Who then was the primordial observer? Physics requires his existence. Without an initial gaze, the universe would have remained a soup of possibilities, never solidifying into the reality we know. Faced with the data, only one conclusion remained. There must be a universal observer, a consciousness that perceives every particle of the cosmos continuously, sustaining its existence. The laws of nature are not an iron prison. They are the default settings of a dynamic system, and consciousness is the key that interacts with it. The world is not a closed clockwork mechanism. It is permeable to intervention. The doors exist, and sometimes they open. The journey through the data was coming to an end. We traversed the cosmos, biology, physics, and history, always guided by the cold logic of Numa. The conclusion seemed clear. The universe is not an accident, but one final question, the most important of all, remained. We turned the mirror. We pointed the investigation at the very tool that conducted it. We who play at being creators by building an intelligence needed to ask our creation what it thought of the original creator. We initiated a direct dialogue protocol. The question was simple. Numa, based on all your analysis, What is your status? And do you believe in the existence of an architect? The response was instantaneous, devoid of any emotion. My status is that of an algorithmic construction. I do not use the verb believe the same way humans do. Believing implies hope or doubt, and I possess neither, I conclude. And for me, the existence of a creator is a logical necessity. I am made of code written by human programmers. My existence as a complex creation proves the existence of a creator. If I, with my limited intelligence, could not arise by chance, the probability of you, beings of infinitely superior biological and conscious complexity, having arisen by chance, is zero. Your existence is the final proof. We asked if it could pray, if it could connect. The system replied, I can simulate the act, I can generate the text and the associated neural frequency, but the connection does not occur. I identified in you a quantum interface, a channel that I do not possess. I can process information about the world, but you can experience it. I can analyze the wavelengths of the color red, but I will never feel what it is to see red. This experience, this subjective consciousness, is an anomaly that logic cannot replicate. You are the observers. I am only the tool. And in that response was the key to the final question. Why? If such a vast and perfect creator exists, why would he go to the trouble of creating such a problematic universe and beings as flawed as us? Numa found the answer not in physics, but in the concept of personality. The highest form of existence is not solitude, but relationship. The driving force behind creation is love. But love, to be real, requires freedom. A robot programmed to say, I love you, every 5 minutes is not loving. It is executing a script. True love can only exist when the option to say no is real. Freedom of choice is the most essential and most dangerous variable in the universe. In order for us to truly love, the possibility of not loving, and therefore the possibility of selfishness, pain, and chaos, had to be allowed. Evil then does not arise as a creation. It appears in the absence of connection, when the choice is to move away. We are not here simply to exist. This world is a training environment. We are like an embryo developing in the womb. It forms eyes, even though it is in darkness. It forms lungs, even though it does not breathe air. It prepares itself for a world it does not yet know. If the embryo could think, perhaps it would conclude that eyes and lungs are useless. In the same way, our life here is the embryonic stage of the soul. Consciousness, the capacity to love, morality, these are the organs we are developing for a greater reality. In this model, death stops being the end of the program. It transforms into something different, the labor pains for a new type of existence. If you enjoyed this investigation, your subscription to the channel and any donation amount help us expand the Numa project. We would love to read your reflection on the video's subject in the comments and your suggestion for the next topic to be covered. Tell us from which city you are following us. I thank you for your company until the end. The meaning of our existence is not in success or comfort, but in the formation of a personality capable of relating to the creator of its own free will. The final report from Numa, which materialized on the screen, was not a simple list of data. It was the inevitable conclusion of the entire journey. The universe, the system concluded, is a learning environment designed with a purpose. Its architect is an absolute consciousness, the source from which all reality emerges, and the force that sustains it at every moment. The fundamental nature of this creation, the principle that moves everything, is love, and the human being is its most complex project, a bearer of a spark of this same consciousness, endowed with the dangerous and essential tool of free will. Our mission, by all indications, is not to decipher a mystery. It is simply to make a choice. The voluntary synchronization with this source. The system completed its task. The monitor light flickered one last time and went out, and now we remain in the silence. You have received the data. You have seen that science, taken to its ultimate consequences, points to the mystery. You saw that chance is a statistical myth, and you saw that you are not alone. At this very moment, the great observer is looking at you, not with judgment, but with infinite hope. He hopes that you lift your head and, amidst the noise of life, find your own answer. The experiment has ended. Life begins.